Internet connectivity has always been a problem for rural America, but the way different areas respond makes a difference.
We need it because this is a part of a comprehensive community and economic development strategy to create opportunities.
Tapping into everyone in America, boys, girls, people of color, people living in rural America, will make us stronger. And if those are the people who don't have the internet, we're losing out on their talent.
The internet. It's something so crucial to so much of what we do day in and day out. Work, education, healthcare via telehealth, weather alerts, even relaxing to binge watch the final season of Succession. So many of us now take our fast internet for granted without ever really realizing how essential it is to everyday modern life. From the start of the digital era, equitable internet access across America has been an ongoing problem. A 2020 Data Reportal study found that the US ranks 27th out of 30 countries analyzed when it comes to basic internet connectivity. This became really apparent too when COVID-19 forced us to enter a remote world. Many children couldn't access online schooling, and others couldn't access healthcare through remote treatment. This connectivity challenge is so critical to so many that it now has a name, the digital divide. So when President Joe Biden signed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in 2021, he took a slice of that big legislation to address the digital divide. It manifested in the Digital Equity Act, which would require the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, to establish grant programs to promote digital equity and build capacity for states, tribes, and territories to increase the adoption of broadband. Welcome to Empathy Affect, Forsmarsh Media's podcast that explores the human side of government. I'm Melissa Harris, and today we'll learn about the essential nature of high-speed internet access in our lives and how the Digital Equity Act aims to bring this key resource to all of America. With me is NTIA's first ever Digital Equity Director, Angela Thi Bennett, who will walk us through how her agency is working alongside everyday Americans to close that digital divide. Hi, Angela. Happy summer, and thank you for joining us on Empathy Affect. First of all, just how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you doing, Melissa?
I'm doing just fine. So today we're here to talk about the Digital Equity Act and NTIA's role in bridging the digital divide. But I just wanted to tee things up a little bit first. Before the passage of the Digital Equity Act, what were some of the greatest barriers for communities that lacked high-speed internet access and skills to leverage online technology? And how did the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbate or further emphasize the digital divide?
Thanks, Melissa. So prior to the pandemic, our underserved communities were suffering from lack of access to the internet, either because it wasn't available or it wasn't affordable, or if it was available or affordable, it was substandard or, had data caps. And essentially, if your internet is not affordable, then that's not access. What the pandemic did was it amplified what we, already knew, and that was that high-speed internet access was not a luxury. It is actually a basic necessity. And so, during the pandemic, what we saw was that, our young learners, were not able to access their, education online. Families were not able to, get access to work. And during this crisis, this global crisis, we had, families that were not able to access information, to, essential services, apply for unemployment benefit, be able to access information to be able to discern information, that they're receiving, about the pandemic.
So what does digital equity mean to you? And why is working toward digital equity important for the future of our country's economy, especially amid the sort of grounding you just set?
Yeah, so I'll give you our formal definition of digital equity. So digital equity means the condition in which individuals and communities have the information technology capacity that is needed for full participation in the society and the economy of the United States. Translation. So, so what that means is, for me, it's opportunity to live a fulfilling life, and whatever that means, for that individual. So how do we ensure that individuals have access to not only affordable, reliable, high-speed internet, but they have access to the internet-enabled devices that meet their needs, and then also access to the resources and the skills to meaningfully use the internet to improve their lives, whether it's in workforce, getting access to training opportunities to either reskill or upskill so that they can increase, their earning potential. It means getting access to, educational opportunities,
Mhm.
increasing the educational attainment rate, in our country, because we know that as you increase the educational attainment rates, you also increase opportunities to earn, higher wages. And when you are able to earn higher wages, that also has an impact on healthcare and the health of the community, and even around, safety. Stronger communities mean safer communities when we have those opportunities.
Yeah, and obviously this is something you're really passionate about. Before you even came to NTIA, you spent time working on building digital access and community development in Ohio. Can you tell us a little bit about your time there and how did it shape your perspectives around digital inequities?
Yeah, so my work previous to NTIA, I will say, has really been centered on people. And access to the internet is one of those tools that I was working on to ensure that people had, access, really not only just to the tool, but just to those opportunities. I'll share with you what this actually means, as far as impact for families when you can create hope because you've now exposed them to the opportunities to upskill and improve their economic well-being. Because, you see there's a direct correlation in communities that experience poverty also, experience safety concerns in their community. And when we can leverage such a powerful tool as the internet, we can help, shape those and change those, dynamics in the communities.
Yeah, and based on some of the disparities that have come to light and what you mentioned earlier and what you've seen in Ohio and across the country, how did the Digital Equity Act emerge? And what goals does it have for reducing disparities in connectivity and the digital economy?
So the Digital Equity Act was a part of the Biden administration's Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And so within the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, it included $2.75 billion to achieve digital equity in our country. And so that includes state planning grants of $60 million that will go to states, territories, and tribal governments to develop these digital equity plans. Once they develop the digital equity plans, they will then submit to us those plans for funding for our state capacity grant, which is $1.44 billion to implement the plans that they have. And then our funding is sequential. So after we release the capacity funds that will go to the states, territories, and the tribal governments to implement these plans, we will have a competitive grant fund that will become available for local communities and nonprofit organizations that are like on the ground serving, our covered populations. And that's about a $1.25 billion competitive grant program. And so this program, coupled with our BEAD program, which is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, and that's $42.45 billion. That is to connect each of the households in America to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. And so the two programs work in conjunction, and together both require a robust local engagement. What does that mean? What does robust local engagement mean to the people? It means states are required to go to the seats, to go to the tables of those communities that are most impacted by the digital divide and ensure that they have a seat at the planning table to help co-create solutions that truly meets the needs of their communities. Because so often with the power and the funding, they go off into a room and they think that they know what's best for communities. And they design these solutions that are disconnected from the people. The process that is in place under this administration is that we have to go to the seats, to the tables of those most impacted and ensure that their voices are reflected into these plans. It is literally the largest demonstration of participatory democracy this country has ever seen. So as we are traveling around the country, I am hearing from individuals, not just leaders of organizations, but the lived experts in these communities, that they are engaging and that their voices are being heard.
I think that community engagement piece is so important. I think, as you just highlighted, not often enough are stakeholders really just like having that seat at the table. So how do you see the Digital Equity Act and the provisions it has set enhancing any pre-existing digital equity work that NTIA already had in place?
The Digital Equity Program is a new program for NTIA, but how it enhances existing work that's happened. Prior to the passage of the Digital Equity Act program, communities, organizations within communities have been engaged in this work. We've been engaging, and serving people, ensuring that, individuals have the access. What this is doing is we are being very, very intentional and thoughtful. So during the pandemic, the entire world, right, was in crisis mode. And so everyone was just quickly getting devices out, getting, hotspots out. But what this bipartisan infrastructure law is doing, and the BEAD and the digital equity program is doing, is saying, hey, we understand the sense of urgency. So we have these tight timelines. However, we also need to ensure that this work is sustainable and it's actually having the impact that we all want to achieve. So we need to take that time and plan. That means conduct the needs assessment. That means go out into community and find out really what their needs are. Let's not presume we know what their needs are. Let's really go and talk to the people and find out what their needs are. Also, there's an asset inventory. Go out and find out what's working. There's tons of work, amazing work that's being done in our country by people with very little resources that are so resilient. I was in Alaska and in a village in Alaska where there was telehealth in no attack, right? And so they train and certify community health aides, and then they bring the doctor on virtually. And these community health aides are delivering babies and treating patients with the support of a virtual doctor.
Wow.
And so it's powerful. It is so powerful to see. And in order for this village to even get produce or anything, a plane has to come in and bring it in. You can only access it by plane or boat. But with so little, communities are doing so much. So imagine if we're intentional and we start to leverage our collective resources, the impact that we can have in community.
Yeah. Just seeing what communities are doing on their own once they have that, extra boost of support, that'd be incredible. This would be a good moment to chat about some of the milestones that you've hit since the passage of the Digital Equity Act. It's been about 2 years since it passed, and you've been in your position since spring of last year. So can you walk me through some of the miles you've set to date, perhaps where you are with some of your grant programming? I know that some communities and states are starting to put together digital equity plans. Where are you seeing things falling into place now?
So very excited. So I'm happy to say that all 56 states and territories did apply for the digital equity planning grant funds. And to date, we have made awards to all of them. And so the for purposes of our program, Puerto Rico and DC are treated as states. So by the end of November of last year, we made all of the awards. So we've been on a very aggressive schedule to get these awards out. And we just recently made the last of the awards to the territories. And so they're beginning their work. By the end of this year, we expect to receive the digital equity plans from the states. So some states now have already posted their state digital equity plans online for the public to view and provide comments. So that's the other exciting aspect about this. Every single state must post their digital equity plans to receive public comment. And then also, when they submit them to us, address the comments that the public has provided. So that's another exciting opportunity to have, their voices heard as well. And then in early 2024, we expect to, release the capacity grant program so that the states can submit their plans to apply for the implementation.
In early March, too, you issued a request for comment, otherwise known as an RFC, seeking feedback on the Digital Equity Act. That comment period closed on May 1st. So can you share some of the engagement you received?
We had over 250 written responses to this request for comment. We held 4 listening sessions and had over 400 stakeholders who joined and provided their responses as well. We partnered with several community organizations, national organizations as well, that then hosted their own listening sessions and compiled those responses and submitted them to us. So it was just really great reaching out into community. And our responses were not just from organizations, individuals submitted responses as well. And we really tried to make it accessible so people could either use our, online, regulations.gov. They could either email them directly to us, or they could even mail them in, because we recognize not everyone has access to the internet. And we even provided a toolkit so that if local organizations wanted to host their own listening sessions, they could as well.
Yeah, that's it's incredible that you've gotten so much engagement. I mean, the fact that all states and territories applied is a great indicator of how important this is. And also the engagement you've gotten from the request for comment is impressive as well. What were some of your goals in getting feedback from the RFC, and what kinds of trends and input have you gotten?
Well, the purpose of the RFC was to help inform the design and development of our capacity and our competitive grant program. Mm-hmm. It was important for us to hear from community things such as, what does success look like in the capacity program? How would you measure, and evaluate the success of our programs? We wanted to also hear even from the planning grant program, what are those measurables? We wanted to hear from them, as we are, implementing the BEAD program, how can we measure if we've achieved equity in the BEAD program? What does that look like? And so those were, the voices that we wanted to hear to help shape the work that we're doing, because we do appreciate and recognize that they're the experts.
As you sort of get these comments back and map out the next steps, the Digital Equity Act does require NTIA to evaluate the efficacy of the grants you award under the programs you have. So what challenges do you think you have at NTIA right now, or what challenges do you anticipate that grant recipients may face in conducting evaluations, and what kind of support do you think NTIA will provide in evidence building?
So I can share with you one of the things that we're trying to balance, and having been on the other side as a practitioner, it's the collection of data, because it can be burdensome at times, and making sure that we are collecting the information that can really measure the overall impact, but not collect it at such a granular level that it becomes burdensome, to the grantees to collect and report. And so, but we want to measure impact. I mean, we are stewards of taxpayers' funding. The taxpayers have entrusted us with the significant responsibility, and we want to make sure that So we are taking actions that really are having an impact, that we're going to see, increase in the number of jobs. We want to see, how this very intentional leveraged investment of resources are impacting our, underserved community. So when you look at our BEAD program and getting the households connected, and then you leverage the digital equity program funds, and, we've encouraged, states to also look at other funding to kind of blend and braid the various funding that's available. And so when you look at all these investments, do we start to see the needle move on high school graduation rates? Do we start to see the needle move on improved access to healthcare? And we know that when you can improve access to healthcare, you can start to address some of the chronic disease. If individuals and their households have access to the internet, and then we, equip them with the skills in order to use them, so now they can also become aware of the different intervention programs, that exist.
Mm-hmm.
Community can become aware, of this issue, to be proactive. So those are the things that we're looking at. How do we truly build stronger, more connected communities and not lose the connection of people as we're connecting them to technology?
Let's dig into that intersectionality of the digital world a little bit more. Can you share some instances how digital access has provided opportunities or changed the lives of certain people or communities? And how is that different from area to area?
During the Christmas holiday, I helped organize dinners for residents in various public housing, high rises, with the local council person.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking to the residents there, this is outside of my work with the NTIA, this is just work, my service to the community. And he said, they need access to the internet. And he, was suffering, from substance.
Yeah.
And he said they couldn't get access to the AA counseling during the pandemic because you physically couldn't go. But if they had access to the internet, then they could have continued that support. And so we can't look at any one area by itself. This is really the driver as to why the funds are going to the states and saying, hey, your community best.
Mm-hmm.
States, go out to local community and hear from them. Because we can't tell you what's best for your community. Now, we can look at evaluation factors that we're trying to, identify what's high level enough, that will kind of cross, but then allow flexibility for states and communities to identify those specific indicators that are, specific to their community. One state or one community may have opioid as one of their health priorities. Another one may have suicide rate. I was just in Alaska, and the suicide rate in Alaska, I believe, is significantly high. Within their veterans population, it's double.
Mm.
And so for them in that community, they may focus on mental wellness and behavioral health. So you just have to have that flexibility and not dictate. And so that's where, Melissa, the challenge is. And so that's what we're working through. That's what the RFC is going to say. Hey, reading through the RFC and seeing how we can kind of learn from the experts out in the community as part of the work that we do.
Looking forward, what goals do you, NTI, and your partners hope to achieve through the Digital Equity Act in the next 12 months or so?
So with the next 12 months, we will continue to support states in building up the capacity of their offices so that they can be able to go into communities and continue, this needs assessment and the asset inventory and developing, their digital equity plans so that they are truly, kind of meeting the needs of the community, and just recognizing community engagement and stakeholder engagement is not a one-time, exercise. Like, you don't just come out to community one time. This is, really just setting up for the expectation that you have to go back out to the community multiple times. And we need to make sure that we're circling back and sharing with them and making sure that they're having input. we're also supporting states to invest in their communities. Our sustainability will happen when we're also investing in the communities and the organizations that are boots on the ground serving, the different populations. And so that's the next, so the next 12 months, just really helping states get to the finish line of developing these living plans, because once they develop these plans, they will not sit on a shelf. Up to 20% of their capacity funds is to allow states to update and maintain their plans. And so we're expecting states to use this as a living document. Every plan, I don't care how strong, how well you think you've developed the plans, until you start to implement, you're going to have to make shifts because you're dealing with lives and people. And so we have to be, nimble and be able to, course correct and incorporate the learnings that we have. So that's really the next 12 months, and continuing to get out into community and continuing to learn and see how we can, better serve.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that continuous engagement is so important to you. I love the fact that earlier you mentioned that this is the largest demonstration of participatory democracy in this country. I think it's just a testament to how important digital equity is. How do you feel that you're making such a direct impact on so many lives as you're doing this work? What does it feel like for you?
Oh, that's a breather. Oh. This will sound cliche, but it's an honor and it is a privilege that I have been entrusted in this role to serve our country. Because for me, this is not just a job. It's not just merely administering a grant program. This is about changing lives. This is about making a difference. This is about saving lives. And when you are entrusted in such a role, it's humbling. And so, I take the charge very seriously. I'm always out wanting to learn more, learning how to be more effective, what resources, we need to develop to support states as they're going out, and administering the program. How can we be much more intentional and thoughtful and think outside the box of being able to serve, the different needs of the populations that we're serving? And so I absolutely love the work that I do. And I mean, I literally am excited. I get up every day and I'm excited and, about, how can I, better serve the people.
I really appreciate you telling the stories you've told today, sharing the progress we're making, and giving us a glimpse into what the future of this country can look like.
Yeah, well, I really thank you for the opportunity to join. And I will say we have a phenomenal team, here within NTIA. And I'll just quickly, kind of share the structure. But within every single state, we have what we call a state federal program officer, our state FPO. They live in the states and they're boots on the ground. So they're not only supporting the state broadband office, but they're also going out into community and helping to make those connections of community to the state broadband office as well. And we are all accessible. So know that we are all here to serve you, the community, and please always feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks so much. Shout out to the state FPOs, shout out to you, shout out to NTIA, and thank you for helping us reach a more equitable digital environment across this country.
Thanks, Melissa.
A few weeks after our discussion with Angela about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Digital Equity Act, President Biden announced that his administration is awarding over $40 billion across all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and territories to deliver high-speed internet access where there's either no service or where service is still slow.
With this funding, along with other federal investments, we're going to be able to connect every person in America to reliable, high-speed internet by 2030.
This step, along with some of the efforts we discussed today, is part of the administration's commitment to providing nationwide, high-speed connectivity by the end of the decade. If you want to keep up to date about NTIA, the Internet for All initiative, and your state's broadband office, check out the show notes to find more information. I know we chatted a lot today about equity, and next month we're going to kind of piggyback off of that into an awesome two-part special. We'll chat about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the federal workforce with a few fantastic folks. So I can't wait to share those conversations with you. Thanks as always for tuning in to Empathy Affect. Until next time, please share the show with your friends, subscribe, and follow. Thanks, y'all.
Empathy Effect is a product of Forrest Marsh. You can reach us at forrestmarshmedia@forrestmarsh.com with any feedback, questions, or inquiries. If you want to know more about today's guest, are interested in participating with Forrest Marsh, or becoming part of our community, check out our show notes for more information.